Sometimes on a live stream, you need to show somebody talking like your pastor and also show the slides that they're talking about all on the same screen. Now, there are different ways to actually accomplish this. Some churches use lower thirds. Some actually put a TV up on the stage so you can see the pastor standing next to it and see them both in the same shot. We do something a little different using what's called a SuperSource with our ATEM constellation switcher. This isn't unique to ATEM switchers, but they have the feature, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, it's worth noting that not all switchers on the ATEM line have the SuperSource feature. I'm looking at you, ATEM Mini. But if you have one of their bigger switchers, you probably have this feature. Now, essentially, a SuperSource allows you to take multiple inputs and stitch them together into a single output. That can look like a grid view or really whatever you want to do and how you want to arrange them. You can use up to 4 inputs and also use another input for the actual background of the SuperSource. We usually just like to do a side-by-side of our pastor and the slides all over a black background, but the sky is kind of the limit on how you set it up, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now using ATEM Software Control. So let's jump into it. So once we're in here, there's a few things we need to look for. First off, we look for this SS1 button, and that's the actual SuperSource. And then over here under palettes, we also have SuperSource, which is where you'll configure your SuperSource. If you don't have those two buttons, unfortunately, your switcher does not actually support using a SuperSource, so you're out of luck, sorry. Right now, we're using the ATEM Constellation 2ME, and so if you have this one, great, you have this ability. So first, let's go ahead and take a look at what our SuperSource actually looks like. You can see it here down on our multi-view. We have a side-by-side of camera 1, which is set up over here, and our presentation slides, which are coming into the switcher here. If we go ahead and take it live, you can see that pop up, and we've just got it over a simple black background. We don't do anything super fancy with it. We like to keep it as undistracting as possible, just really showing what we need to. The keen-eyed among you will also notice that the camera input is actually not the normal aspect ratio because we've cropped it in a little bit. This is because usually when somebody's reading off of scripture or something, they're not really moving, and so we don't need the full width, and instead the full width of the slides is a little bit more important. So how do we actually configure this? Well, we jump over here into Software Control, and over here under SuperSource, you've got a few different tabs, and we'll kind of run through it and how you can configure your own. It's worth mentioning though that Blackmagic actually provides a few presets for you if you don't need anything custom built. I don't know how useful any of these will specifically be to you guys, but it's worth knowing they're here. So we can kind of click through these layouts and see what they do. We'll go ahead and set the SuperSource live though, so that we can get a full screen view of what's happening. So this first one is just a 2x2 grid, then with some weirder shapes, 2, and kind of a interesting shaped one here. So you probably don't necessarily love any of these right out of the box, but you can configure them exactly how you need using this as a starting point. So let's start with this one, the most basic, the 2x2 grid. Down here under box control, you can see it actually splits it into 4 different boxes. And those are essentially the 4 inputs that you can have as part of your SuperSource. If we're here on box 1, we can see that, hey, it's enabled. If we go ahead and check this box, it'll disappear from our SuperSource. It'll no longer actually include that box. So if you don't want to use all 4, this is what you'll do. Next up is the source. You can actually choose what source is being used for that box. So right now it's set to slides, but let's set it to color bars. And there you can see it change directly on the SuperSource. But let's change it back to slides. Next up is position. You can actually change the X and Y of this element here on your SuperSource and even change the size of it here. Finally, you can also crop top, left, bottom, right. And as you do that, you can see it start to crop down or crop left. And you can do this in case, like I said, your input doesn't actually need to have the full screen in case you want to make room for other things. Let's go ahead and clean this up and reset back to that layout. So you can see how easy this is to actually set up, and you can do this for any one of the other boxes. Next up, we can go to the Art tab. And here is what we have the fill source, which is essentially what the background is of your SuperSource. And again, this can actually be any of your inputs. So for example, if we wanted to set camera 1 as our fill source, you can kind of see how that SuperSource is laid out on it. But maybe you really only need box 1 then in this case, if we want to just have the slides up in the corner next to our pastor preaching. And there you go. This gives you more of a picture-in-picture vibe like you would maybe see on the news, and while this is definitely easy to set up and pretty useful, I don't love the look of it for a church, but maybe it fits what you guys are doing really well. Now if we go back to the Art tab, there's also more advanced things you can do where you can actually use keys and key different things out on your SuperSource. We don't get that advanced, but if that's something that makes sense for you, go ahead and dig into it a little bit more. I won't be covering it here though. Hey, sorry to interrupt. Do you and your camera ops often get confused about all the different settings you need to actually control your cameras? Click the link in the description below and download my free camera settings cheat sheet. That way you'll never be confused again. Okay, back to the video. And finally, the copy tab. If you actually set some settings on a given box that you want to copy to your other boxes, you can go ahead and do that here as well. This just gives you a quick way of doing that. Now, one thing about the SuperSource that you need to be aware of though, is if you build something custom, as we've done here, and then somebody accidentally clicks this preset, there's no way to get back to those custom settings that you've set up, which can be really frustrating. There's a couple different things you can do here. One is you can actually go in after you've created your custom settings and you can save the state of your ATEM. And then as long as nobody ever changes what your SuperSource looks like, it will maintain whatever the last state of it was, and you can just load your ATEM settings. This is great, but again, it doesn't really cover you for the case that somebody accidentally just clicks something in the middle of a service and now you're kind of out of luck. To get around that, you can actually create a macro inside of ATEM Software Control. That macro will actually create your SuperSource from scratch. So anytime you need to use the SuperSource, instead of having to just turn it on and off, you actually recall the macro, which will build it and then display it as if it was saved in there the whole time. This is how you can actually create multiple custom SuperSources and kind of have them saved and be able to recall them anytime you need to. That's how we do it, except we do it a little bit differently. Rather than using ATEM macros, I actually use a companion button instead. I like to keep all of my macros inside of companion, that way everything is getting controlled from the same place. If you want to keep it in the ATEM Software Control though, that's totally up to you. It's really just a preference thing. If you've never used Companion but you want to learn how to get it set up and use it for your church livestream, take a look at this video here where I run through the setup and different things that you can use it for. But let's go ahead and look at our setup here. If we look at our SuperSource button, we can see that it actually is exactly what we've seen inside of the software control, but split up into different commands, where we can actually choose what goes in each box, whether the boxes are enabled or disabled, the size, the positioning, etc. That way I can just hit this SuperSource 1 on button and it will build it from scratch and display it perfectly. And then I can also just turn it off anytime I need to turn it off and go back to what I was previously seeing. The way that we actually use our switcher for our live stream, we actually use ME2 kind of as a clean feed, and then ME1 just follows it and can kind of cut away from it sometimes. So for our SuperSource, we actually don't take it on ME2. Instead, we just take the input from ME2 and use it as one of the inputs to our SuperSource. That way, in our recordings, ME2 is still a clean feed of whatever camera we were using, and ME1 has a SuperSource. It's a little bit complicated, but it's something that really works for us and gives us a lot of flexibility. Definitely don't feel like you have to take that approach. Instead, you can just use a certain input for your SuperSource whenever you need to take it. But that's why you'll see ME2 as the source here in Companion. But anyway, there you have it. That's how you create a SuperSource in ATEM Software Control and actually recall it and create it on demand using Companion or an ATEM macro. I promise it's not that complicated and it's super powerful. You can do way more with it than what we actually do in our live stream, if that's something that fits you and your live stream's workflow. Let me know down in the comments actually if you're using SuperSources in any kind of cool ways or using any of the more advanced features with it. I'd love to see it. And also let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to help out where I can and make sure that you guys are able to create the live streams that you need for your churches. Until next time.